Well, another busy three-game week in the EFL Championship comes to a close this weekend as we look ahead to Matchweek 29, which takes place between Friday and Monday this weekend. We're going to preview and predict all 12 games, some absolutely massive ones at the top and bottom. And as always, I'll encourage you to do the same in the comments below. Give us your score predictions for this weekend's action, and if you beat or match my overall score, you'll get a shout out in the next full episode, which will be next Wednesday, looking ahead to match week 30. A quick reminder as well that we will have a mini midweek special on Sunday night. We'll be looking ahead to the rearranged Tuesday game between Pompey and Millwall with a feature-length special preview of that one. But before we go and look ahead to this weekend, we have got to do a little bit of a recap. And for the second time in a row, and it is making history on this channel because I've never done it twice in successive episodes, I am the outright winner of Match Week 28. 13 points picked up for me, 9 correct outcomes and 2 perfect scores. Derby v Sunderland, albeit was a little fortunate. Not sure what the second goal was ruled out for. However, I also got 3 points for the QPR victory by 2-1 and got all of the outcomes right, apart from the shock home defeats for Watford and Blackburn, and due to Luton's leaky defence again, costing them a point. So for me, 13 points. I do want to give one quick shout out to the only other person in double figures though. Brian got 11, and the reason you deserve a shout out for getting the last 2 scores correct. Bristol City's 2-2 draw at Wednesday, and more importantly, the 5-0 Burnley win at Plymouth, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. For now though, we've got to move on to match week 29 and a very big weekend in the Championship. We start with, I always hate to say this word, it's a home banker on paper. It is Sheffield United versus Hull City, and Hull City, well, a difficult day against QPR, it must be said. Into the bottom 3, and to be fair, they weren't outplayed by any means. It was actually a game of not that many big chances, but overall didn't assert that dominance and that control that you'd like to see. And we got used to Hull being very efficient at home under Liam Rossini, and unfortunately, that's just not quite there at the moment. So for this game, it's going to make it a little trickier for them. Going away to a Sheffield United side that are back in the top 2, have won all of their last 3 championship games, and again, put a couple past Swansea City. Perhaps a little fortunate because at 1-1, the red card, in my opinion, was quite harsh for Swansea. A swing at the ball, yes, but certainly the reaction is what got the red card. However, you've got to give Sheffield United credit. They're so efficient. They just keep the ball rolling and keep picking up points. And they seem to almost always score 2 a game, and they're so solid at the back. They're just a very good championship team, and they're going to be in that mix till the end of the season. I know it's going to be a difficult game because the Friday nights on TV always bring a surprise, but I can't see any way Sheffield United don't win this. And I'm going to go yet again, as I did last weekend, for the standard home score of 2-0. Let's move on to Saturday, and we start with an early kickoff that in normal circumstances would be very easy to predict. It is Luton Town versus Millwall. Luton were sucker punched against Oxford, a 3-2 defeat. Better signs in the attacking display, but defensively, I can't keep going on about it. We know Luton have wasted a lot of chances this year, and they could have had more goals than they've scored. However, you cannot concede from almost every cross. And I've said this before, Mark McGuinness, brilliant attacking the ball in the other box. When he's not marked, he's a brilliant and accurate header of the ball. In any sort of duel, when there's any sort of pressure on him, he just crumbles. He's alongside Tom Holmes, who with the greatest respect to him is probably 5th or 6th choice when everyone's fit. The only positives for Luton is that there was some attacking intent in that game. They took the lead twice, which is a positive sign. And I would say as well, Alfie Doughty coming back off the bench will allow Bell to move into centre-half if need be. So there are positives there. But overall, defensively, you're not going to survive if you can see goals like that every week. For Millwall, much the similar frustration, to be honest. Conceded very late in each half against Cardiff City. Blew a 2-goal lead. Blew the chance at a first victory under Alex Neil. It's been a bit of a slow start for him. You do have to say in that game, Cardiff were the aggressors. And maybe actually going 2-0 up quite early was a harm for Millwall because it did hinder them in terms of their attacking display. It was more clinging on to what they had. In the end, Cardiff created more of the chances and probably deservedly got their equaliser in the end. Now, this game is very often 1-1 at Kenilworth Road, but both sides are out of form. Millwall are sliding, Luton are in the bottom 2. If they win it, though, there'll be 2 points between these sides. 2 of the out of form teams in the division, I have to sit on the fence. And despite the fact both defences would suggest otherwise, I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1 apiece, the safe prediction for this game. Let's move on to another very tough one to call, a battle of mid-table between Norwich City and Swansea City. Norwich are out of form and out of goal-scoring form because, of course, Borja Sainz suspended, a lot of other attacking players out, and they have had a pretty tough run of fixtures. Lost to Premier League Brighton, and then they've played the top two and been beaten pretty convincingly in both away from home. They did win their last home game against Coventry in the league though, whereas Swansea are just a bit of a mess everywhere at the minute. Battered away at Portsmouth and Cardiff in the derby, of course. Then at home to Sheffield United, a tough ask, got a point against West Brom. But on the road, they've looked really poor recently. We know Norwich City aren't carrying that massive goal threat, but we do have to factor in the quality of opposition as well. There were positives for them. Again, Josh Sargent getting another half an hour, and they're building that fitness up for him. So they're just starting to get 1 or 2 back. And I think at home against the Swansea side that have been so poor on the road, again, a lot of people will go for a draw here. I don't just want to sit on the fence every game, no. So I think I'm going to sneak a Norwich victory just based on the last home and away game for each of them. I don't think Swansea will have the same collapse that they've had in the last couple, albeit I wouldn't rule it out. I'm going to go for Norwich City to win narrowly by 2-1 at Carrow Road. And the final early kickoff is a big one near the bottom. It is Stoke City versus Oxford United. Oxford are now, well away from danger after that 3-2 win against Luton. You've got to say to them, they've been competitive at home all season. They've won both of their home games this week. They've had a very good week overall. Lots of signs of concern defensively from set pieces in particular, but also from crosses into the box. It wasn't their best performance, but to be fair, it didn't have to be against Luton, and Gary Rowett is continuing to pick up points. He will really want to do so at Stoke as well, one of the many managers that didn't have a great time there. And here's Mark Robins becoming the latest because it's been a very slow start domestically. Lots of draws followed by a 3-1 defeat at Pompey in midweek. Couple of pretty poor defensive mix-ups. The game was basically over after 10 minutes. And you've got to say, Pompey were very good value for the win. Stoke didn't create a lot. They gave up a lot of chances. And the only thing they had more of was the possession, which they didn't do a great deal with. So it's going to be a bit of a slow burner. They've really got to replace Tom Cannon going forward. And to see the defensive frailties reappear will be a big cause of concern for Stoke City supporters. So in this one, I don't know. Oxford have been poor away from home most of the year. I know they got that win at Millwall, but they've generally struggled to dominate or control a game on the road. Stoke have been draws galore prior to midweek. So I'm going to go for the same again. For the second time, the Championship's favourite scoreline this weekend of 1-1. On to the 3 p.m. kickoffs, and we start with Bristol City versus Blackburn Rovers, which is becoming a pretty big game in that playoff race now. Bristol City just 4 points behind 6th place Blackburn, and they picked up a pretty decent point in midweek at Sheffield Wednesday. They'd been a little frustrating spell with the draws at Plymouth and the defeat at Coventry, but that late draw will feel a little bit different. We talk about Bristol City conceding late goals, but to be fair to them, they came from behind twice. They'll be a little bit annoyed that they conceded straight after the first equaliser. But in the end, given how Sheffield Wednesday have been this season, I don't think that's a bad result. And they actually probably had a couple of the better chances in the game, generally controlled the ball, but still they're always going to be a little susceptible defensively. It's just how Bristol City are. For Blackburn, a very surprising week because maybe the defeat away at Oxford we could see coming. They're not a great side on the road, but at home to Coventry this midweek, a goal either side of half-time in a game where it was a little bit odd. There were just bundles of brilliant chances. It doesn't look like much if you look at the stats. Only just over 20 shots in the whole game, only 11 on target between the two sides. But most of the chances in those games should have been converted. You could argue Coventry had the slight better of them, but Blackburn had a few good chances to score themselves. And they'll be very upset they didn't even harm the score sheet in that one. I think it was a little bit of a concern to see their defensive display there against Coventry because that's normally what you can bank on, having conceded less than 1 a game this year. And I think for this one, given the fact that they've had a couple of poor performances in a row and their away form's not great generally, it's not one of the sides I think they can go to and just play for a draw as they did against Leeds United. So I think they're going to have to come out, which suits Bristol City. They've been scoring a fair few in recent weeks. So I'm going to go for them to do so again. I'm going to go for my little wildcard scoreline here of Bristol City to win by 3-1. As we move on to a huge game just outside the relegation zone, it is Cardiff City versus Derby County. Cardiff, well, To be fair, it's been a decent week, hasn't it? They're continuing the unbeaten run. They are yet to lose in 2025 in all competitions. A 2-2 draw against Millwall with that 97th minute equaliser. I mentioned it a bit earlier on in the Millwall section though. After going 2-0 down, which you can't really afford to do in the Championship, they were the better side. Yes, Millwall sat back a bit later on, but Cardiff pushed, they got the pressure on, and in the end I think they deserved to get something from the game. So kept going till late in both halves and deservedly got their result to back up that Derby win at the weekend. Whereas for Derby County, it's been a tough week. Yes, a 1-0 defeat against Sunderland. Let's be honest, it should have been 2. I don't think anyone on earth can work out why that goal was ruled out for Sunderland. However, a few chances from set pieces, had a couple off the line, but overall, Sunderland looked a real threat on the counter-attack and Derby struggled to deal with it defensively. I mentioned at the start of the month, some of the people they're letting go. Yes, overall it will improve the squad moving forward in terms of quality, but they're letting leaders who have done well in this situation before leave the club. The likes of Sonny Bradley and James Collins, who we know from Luton, very good leaders in the dressing room. And it does seem a strange time to be letting those folk go, and it's coincided with what has now become a very poor run. And yes, you've got to say, in fairness, Derby have played the likes of Leeds, Watford and Sunderland in that spell. Sheffield Wednesday, they're all top half teams. And this is the first opportunity they've really had against a side in and around them in 2025. Are they going to be able to make it count when their away record's so poor? I don't think they are. Cardiff, they're playing at the wrong time. I'm going to go for the home side to nick a win. An ugly one by 1-0. Into the second half, and we start with another side who have had a very good week so far. It is Coventry City who host Watford. Coventry back-to-back wins. Hasn't happened often this season, and to be fair, an away win at Blackburn, a very good result. I mentioned it earlier. They weren't defensively very solid despite the clean sheet. On another day, Blackburn could have scored 2 or 3. They created some really good chances on the counter and arguably should have had more than 2 themselves. So a very entertaining game to watch, surprisingly, but a very good win for Coventry in the circumstances. For Watford, it's been a bit more of a contrasting week. That rare away win at Derby, followed by a rare home defeat, you have to say, against Preston. A game in which, yes, they got that late consolation, but overall, they were really poor. It's very unusual for us to see Watford give away so many good chances at home. I know Preston only had a third of the ball, but they probably should have scored 4 or 5. They had some great breakaway chances. And Watford defensively, I can't remember the last time I saw that at home. So a few concerning features defensively for them. Didn't look the best going forward against a solid side. And it does make me question this game a little bit more, because Coventry generally have been inconsistent this year, but Watford on the road have been poor. And while they have looked better against Derby and Cardiff, this is a Coventry side that on paper are a little better. So I'm going to back the home side to get a victory here. I'm not going to go for a third clean sheet of the week. I am going to go for a Coventry win by 2-1. As we move on to the side that beat Watford in midweek, it is Preston North End versus Middlesbrough. Both of these sides picked up wins in the midweek fixtures. Middlesbrough against West Bromwich Albion. Of course, it was a feature of Tony Mowbray returning, but overall, a very comfortable win for Borough. Had a more clinical edge in front of goal, which we haven't always said about them this season. Defensively, still those concerns. They're still giving up chances, but it was a decent performance and a very big result, given the fact that both of those sides were in a battle for the playoffs. For Preston, the question is, can they pull away from danger? Well, it looks like it at the minute. Draws against Oxford and Luton, followed by that win at Watford, where I have to say, a rare, brilliant Preston performance on the road. Probably should have scored more. The chances they created were brilliant. They played the game perfectly on the counter-attack. They didn't have much possession, but they looked like scoring almost every time they went forward. And their only disappointment will be the fact that they won that game 2-1 when it should have probably been 3 or 4-0 if it wasn't for the late concession and they'd taken their chances. They've still not been the most consistent this year. They've drawn the second most games of anyone in the division, but they were only bettered by West Brom in that fact, and Middlesbrough have beaten them in midweek. So I'm going to go for Borough to win again, a narrow victory. I'm going to go by 2-1, but this time for the away side. As we move on to 2 of the teams that have been most impressive this year. Last season, it was a battle near the bottom, but now QPR versus Sheffield Wednesday is a top half chase for the playoffs. QPR, one of the informed teams in the division, 4 successive victories, a perfect start to 2025 in a championship, and they continued that with a 2-1 win away from home at Hull City. Yes, they had a little late hairy spell after conceding in the 84th minute, but prior to that, they were very solid, didn't create bundles of chances. It wasn't like the Plymouth game where they should have had hatfuls, But it was just a very good away display. And again, QPR looking very consistent. Got to say, big shout out defensively. Since Ronnie Edwards has come in, he's done a really good job. And when you've got that experience alongside, whether it's Fox, whether it's Dunn, whether it's Steve Cook at times, there's so much solidity in that defence. And QPR are starting to get their rewards for sticking with their manager earlier in the season because they look very good at the minute. Whereas for Sheffield Wednesday, frustration against Bristol City, I think, to concede late on and to give up the lead twice. But overall, it's been a very solid season. I know the owner has caused a bit of a rift with the fan base last week. Again, don't know why he got involved. But look, they lost at Leeds. They've kept results in most of the other games. Away from home, they've certainly not been as strong this year. But they do have their days. And this game, everyone's going to expect QPR to win now. And I've just got a feeling it's going to be a chaotic, thrilling end-to-end game. Both sides are scoring goals for fun this year. QPR have been a little better defensively, but as we saw in the Leicester Cup tie, they can throw a few in. Sheffield Wednesday have started conceding more, which is a concern. I'm going to go for a thrilling draw here. Sheffield Wednesday drew 2-2 in midweek. I'm going to go for the same again. 2 goals apiece, just as they did against Bristol City and Millwall. The penultimate game on Saturday is, again, I've got to use the B word. It's a home banker on paper. It is Sunderland versus Plymouth Argyle. We'll get to Sunderland and the goal that should have been in a minute. But do we owe Wayne Rooney an apology? Because I know they only lost 1-0 at the weekend, but 5 down at home at half-time against Burnley. The QPR game should have been 3 or 4. Wayne Rooney was competitive in pretty much every single home game with Plymouth Argyle this season. And while they had their troubles on the road, they weren't 5 down at half-time in games. And I actually think they've got worse. I mean, the best spell they had was under the interim where they did okay. But let's be honest, that was an abject performance from Plymouth. This is a Burnley side who we've got to remember have really struggled for goals this season. Burnley had scored 31 goals in 27 games going into midweek. Plymouth Argyle were pathetic. It was generally dismal. And we said when the manager special came along, I'm very surprised they didn't go back for Schumacher and just say, look, let's put the past behind us and get the best manager for the job. A bit like Luton did with Nathan Jones for the second spell a few years ago. If you're going to let Rooney go, you do not want to be getting worse. And look, maybe his stock will rise from this, I don't know. But that was a really damning day. And Plymouth, they're at risk of getting cut adrift here. Sunderland, a very solid 1-0 win at Derby. Looks a real threat on the counter. They've got the best elements of that Tony Mowbray side that got to the playoffs a couple of years ago. But with the additions of people like Chris Mepham in the defence, they've now got that solidity back there as well. And I just think Sunderland look a really good team. They're in that 4 teams at the top that are running away with it. And the only disappointment from that game was that they didn't win 2-0. And you feel a bit for Isidore after missing the 2 penalties on Friday. Scored a perfectly good goal. And then it's ruled out for some reason that I don't think any of us will ever be able to explain. I do think Lefay looks a really good addition as well. They've got solidity. They've got that youth and energy in midfield. It's just a really solid squad. And while they are probably of the top 4 most susceptible if they get a couple of injuries in key areas, I do think overall they're a very solid team. Not their best performance at Derby, but did enough for sure. And in this game, they have to win. I mean, Plymouth, maybe they're set up a bit more solidly away from home. I don't know. But this season, you wouldn't suggest that, would you? They've been pretty dismal on the road all year. The only time they looked good was the one game in interim management away from home at Stoke City defensively. And even then, they had to cling on a bit. I'm going to go for Sunderland to win and win big. We're just basically guessing who's going to get the correct score this week. I'm going for Sunderland, even though they don't score that many, to win by 4-0. After that one, though, I think the final game on Saturday may provide a slightly lower scoring affair. It is West Bromwich Albion versus Pompey. West Brom, of course, under Tony Mowbray's management now, a 2-0 defeat at Middlesbrough. A game that sort of highlighted their frailties, didn't it? They gave up a couple of chances that were decent. They had a bit of the ball. They've got some tidy players, but they've not got enough of a clinical edge. Only 1 shot on target from 15. Lots of players who can produce a moment of magic from 20, 25 yards, but they need to find that consistency in the attacking patterns when it comes to creating chances and try and retain that discipline they had under Carlos Corberán. They come up against a Pompey side now who were brilliant against Stoke in midweek. Again, 2-0 up after 10 minutes, took advantage of some pretty lax defending, dominated the match, had the chances to win it and deservedly did. They've looked so good at home in recent weeks. But Portsmouth are pretty terrible on the road. They were beaten comfortably at Blackburn. They either lose late on or they lose heavily. The question is which it's going to be here. West Brom don't score the most goals. They do struggle to break teams down. I think Pompey will still sit a little further behind the ball, but they're not a solid defensive side. They will get broken down eventually. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it will be edgy as Mowbray looks for his first win. I'm going to go for a 1-0 victory for West Bromwich Albion, maybe with an element of clinging on late on. And then the final game, a huge one at the top on Monday night, and it's the start of a run of big Monday night games for Leeds, because between now and the end of February, they face all of the rest of the top four on Monday Night Football. It is Burnley versus Leeds United. This game's huge because Leeds, a Rolls-Royce team at home, 3-0 against Wednesday, 2-0 against Norwich. Never really in doubt. A very comfortable day at the office for them. Norwich had no shot on target. Leeds controlled the game. Probably should have scored more than they did. However, away from home, we know they've got a bad performance and result in them. Either struggling to break down defensively solid teams, as we've seen Burnley are this season, or throwing away leads as we saw against Hull. For Burnley, a side that are so robust defensively, it's unreal. They've kept 5 clean sheets in a row. They're yet to concede a league goal in 2025. And they've had the luxury of one of the biggest walks in the park you'll ever see in a championship. 5-0 up at half-time against Plymouth. A brilliant goal from Zian Fleming amongst them. A very comfortable day at the office against, let's be honest, a League One team in waiting at the moment because of the managers they've had this season. But Burnley had the luxury of being able to say, who fancies a rest in the second half? Who fancies a few minutes off? Who needs a few minutes to keep up to speed? And it's just worked out beautifully for them, hasn't it? So going into this game, they couldn't have asked for much more on Wednesday night. I think this is going to be a hard one to call because Burnley don't concede goals. 9 in 28 games is insane. But Leeds are such an attacking threat. On the counter, they're brilliant. But how will the game pan out? Will Leeds try and bring Burnley into a trap? Are Burnley just going to sit like the away team and try and play for a draw? Let's be honest, Sunderland gave them a real scare last week and they should have lost that game. A couple of penalty saves and James Trafford being a hero to thank. I'm going to go a little bit against the grain here. Burnley don't concede goals. Leeds generally have been winning. I'm going to sit on the fence for the last game. I have no idea what to go for. And that means I have to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline. Burnley 1, Leeds 1 to finish. I'll be very interested to see what you will go for in this game. With that out the way though, let's have a quick recap of what we've gone for this weekend. I have gone for a biggest home win for Sunderland with Plymouth's woes to continue on the road, 4-0 there. My wildcard scoreline, the only other team to score more than 2, Bristol City with a 3-1 win at home to Blackburn. I've gone for Sheffield United and Sunderland obviously to win up there in that promotion race and them to make ground on Burnley and Leeds, who I think will draw 1-1 on Monday night. Those are just my predictions for match week 29 though. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments section and give me your scores for this weekend's action. If you beat or match the overall score, you'll get a shout out next Wednesday when we look ahead to match week 30 next weekend. Between now and then though, we will be back on Sunday with a mini midweek special looking ahead to Pompey v Millwall. A very big game for two sides looking to pull away from the bottom 3. If you did enjoy this one though, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Thank you for continuing to be involved in your numbers. If you want to stay up to date with everything, then do subscribe and turn that notification bell on. And now we're settled in a new house over the next few weeks, you will see the return of live stream watch-alongs and football chats. So come and get involved and keep your eyes peeled for details of them. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Your support as always is appreciated. We'll see you back here on Sunday to look ahead to the rearranged midweek game.